Hello there and a warm welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from 16 Rue Bachemont in Paris. I'm Emma Nelson, and coming up on today's programme, the mayor of Istanbul and main rival to Turkey's president is arrested. The journalist Francis Collings will join me to tell me more. Francis, this is a big day for Turkey, isn't it?
It certainly is. It's also not without precedent. We've seen this before. When the president realises someone is a threat, he often takes steps against them. Whether it's going to benefit him in the long run, we don't know, but it's very hard ever to bet against President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Francis. We'll have the latest as protesters demonstrate against the detention of one of the loudest and most popular critics of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Also coming up, Midori House's editors are in town, and one of them, editor of Konfekt magazine and former Paris resident Sophie Grove, will join me. We'll also enjoy a bit of a design special. In the studio will be the editor-in-chief of Sloft magazine and the designers of Monocle's new home here in Paris. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. Istanbul's mayor and the main voice of opposition in Turkey has been arrested. Ekrem Imamoglu faces charges including corruption and aiding a terrorist group. His supporters have called it a coup against our next president. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined in the studio by Francis Collings, Paris-based foreign news correspondent and indeed a former Istanbul correspondent for TRT World for 8 years until just a couple of years ago. A very warm welcome to the studio, Francis. Look, let's talk a little bit about what has happened in the last 24 hours. This is a shock, but is it unexpected?
No, not really. I mean, this is a man who, when he was first elected mayor of Istanbul in 2019, the election was annulled and a rerun. He was up against Binali Yildirim as a former prime minister. A rerun was ordered. They went to a rerun 2 months later. He was elected again with a far greater majority. So since day one, they've been out to get him because of his popularity, effectively. And a few days ago, his degree was cancelled by the University of Istanbul. And in Turkey, you need to have a degree to run for president, to be president. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the current president, is also always denying he hasn't got a degree because that would have made his life very complicated. So this degree was cancelled, which looked rather petty, but when that happened, it was an indication that things were going to start moving against him. And the other thing is that at the weekend, there's due to be the announcement of the candidate for the opposition CHP party, I think on Sunday, and he was going to be named. Now, of course, he's in jail. Whether they're going to name him while he's still in jail is another matter. But this is not without precedent in this country. I mean, there's been quite a few people who have been leading politicians who have been jailed. There was a mayor of Istanbul who had a small profile in 1999. He was jailed and then he came out a star, and that is the current president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So he, in a sense, is not, you could say, learning from history. It could work against him. It could benefit him, but it certainly angered a lot of people on the streets. Protests at the moment have been banned in Istanbul for the next few days, but they will be protesting about this.
Why is he such a threat to Erdogan?
Well, it comes down to essentially what happens in Turkey with politics. It is a very divided country, and almost every election you look at seems to swing between the secular and based in the cities primarily, in Ankara, in Istanbul, in Izmir, and also the conservative. Erdogan, of course, has been there, first of all, as prime minister, then as president. Then he had a constitutional vote to be a supreme president, rather like here in France or in the United States. But there's always been people who've been gaining in popularity in the city. So we have Ekrem Imamoglu in Istanbul. We have Mansur Yilmaz, who is the mayor of Ankara, also very popular as well, as yet no movement towards him. But another precedent is Selahattin Demirtas, who was the leader of the HDP Kurdish party, did very well in 2015 in 2 elections. He's been in jail, I think, for 9 years now on various charges.
So there is no necessary sign that Imamoglu will be released anytime soon then?
No, there isn't. We wait to see. It is entirely possible that he could be campaigning, and Demirtas has done this, campaigning from his jail will sell if it comes to that. But then again, the elections are not due to be held for a while. This is supposed to be Erdogan's last term. But there is a bit of a caveat in that if he calls a snap election, he can reset effectively, get another 5 years. Or he could go to the country again and ask to change the constitution so that he serves more than 2 terms as president. So when the elections are, we don't know. But obviously the opposition have thought we're going to get our candidate in place, ready to serve, ready to campaign. I guess they're probably expecting at some stage Erdogan to go to the country.
The international response has been rapid in terms of the markets. Turkey's lira's crashed 12% to an all-time low this morning. But Turkey is a difficult country to get angry with because Erdogan in particular is such a complex and involved figure in all levels of geopolitics and the markets.
Well, yes, and also where Turkey is located currently in geopolitical terms is very, very important. The world, Europe does need Turkey. It needs a stable Turkey. We should also mention as well that what Erdogan has been doing over the years, I mean, I've got Turkish friends who educated me in this when I first got there. There was a lot of coups in this country, as you know, until Erdogan came to power. It was swinging between the military and the conservatives over many years. And friends of mine said, look, when there were coups, we didn't worry too much because the institutions stayed more or less intact. What's happened over the last 10 years or so, 10, 12 years, is that the institutions are no longer intact. We're talking the media, we're talking the judiciary, and we're certainly talking the military, which was completely gutted and reorganized after the coup attempt in 2016. So the stability may be there, but it's stability resting in the hands of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. That's the scenario at the moment.
Let's bring in the editor of Konfekt, Sophie Grove. Hello, Sophie. Good to have you with us. We'll be talking to you about what's in your magazine in a little while, but first, this chimes very closely to your heart, doesn't it? You're a former resident of Istanbul, and indeed the Monocle Quality of Life Conference was in Istanbul last year. I think we have to declare a little bit of a sort of an awareness here that I interviewed him, Imamoglu, last year as part when we were out in Paris during the Olympics, and Imamoglu then struck me as an open, sensible, clear-thinking mayor who had a good idea of what was going to be the best interests for Turkey. And you had him deliver a keynote speech at the Quality of Life Conference in Istanbul last year. What was he like?
I mean, he had an enormous security detail, and there was a sense, really, this sense of power around him, but also a sense of foreboding that he did mention in his speech, even though it was about quality of life and the future of Istanbul and all his plans and aspirations for the city. He mentioned too that he had, these enemies and, people watching him, accusing him of corruption. He hinted at it and the room braced somewhat because, there is that context in everything. And as you're saying, nothing is off the table with Erdogan. It's the academic fabric of Istanbul has completely altered. Media, certainly, but even the culture, the television networks, even, sort of period dramas have been sort of targeted by Erdogan as a political kind of threat. So I think it's not a surprise, but it does feel like it must be a huge disappointment because I think Imamoglu was followed by a lot of secular, progressive voices in Turkey. Those that are left, because so many people that I was friends with when I lived there back in sort of 2011 to 2014 who have actually sort of left for New York and London.
Francis, just looking ahead, are there any supporters? Is there another voice that could step in for Imamoglu at the moment?
Well, there is the aforementioned mayor of Ankara, Mansur Yavaş. Now, he did speak a few weeks ago that he would listen to what his party said, and it was asked to run, he would run. Whether somebody wants to be jumping into the shoes of Imamoglu at this stage is probably debatable. And it could well be that if he comes out of jail, his popularity, we're talking Imamoglu, does soar. So would another candidate want to actually be stepping onto that turf at the moment? It could be a political own goal. But the one thing I learned after years in Turkey, and I think you're alluding to the same, is you can't count out someone like President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I mean, the last election, which was the last one I covered, was against the backdrop of those horrendous earthquakes in the south of the country. Tremendous devastation, and a lot of allegations of buildings falling over because they were built cheaply, because of corruption within local government. Most of it pointing towards the AK party, towards Erdogan's party. He still won the election. And the elections tend to be fair as well. There's very little criticism of the election. And the other thing, just to mention quickly, is this is a country with an enormous passion for politics. It stunned me being a Brit, where we're quite passive about things. Oh, well, Brexit, we'll just have to live with it, that sort of thing. Change of prime minister every 6 months, we'll live with it. In Turkey, they come out in their millions. Whoever makes the flags for their political rallies is doing really well, because there are literally everybody with thousands of flags. I've seen so much of it on the May Day rallies. So there's a passion, which you see reflected on the streets of Paris as well, which is very similar.
Francis Collins, thank you so much for joining us in our new studio in Paris. Sophie Grove, you will stay with us in a moment to tell us what's in the middle in Konfekt magazine. That's coming up in just a moment. But first, with the time 13:11 here in Paris, a quick summary of the latest news headlines from Anita Riotta.
Thanks, Emma. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Russian President Vladimir Putin's pledge to accept a limited ceasefire is at odds with reality. This comes after overnight strikes on Ukraine that included attacks on the energy infrastructure. Zelensky also says he will speak with Donald Trump to learn the details of the U.S. president's call with Putin on Tuesday. The leader of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, and Rwandan President Paul Kagame have held a surprise summit in Qatar, calling for an immediate ceasefire. It is the first meeting of the two leaders since Rwanda-backed M23 rebels stepped up their campaign in the eastern DRC at the start of this year. And Japan Airlines is planning to nearly double its order of Boeing 737-8 planes. This is a bid to refresh its fleet in the coming years. The airline announced today that it would purchase 17 jets in addition to 21 planes it ordered in 2023. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Anita. Well, if you are listening as a regular listener of the briefing, you may notice a slight change in sound. That is because we have a slight change of studio. We are at Monocle's new office, base, café, you name it. We've built it here in Paris in 16 Rue Bachaumont. And it gives us the opportunity to really sort of take a good look and settle in and bed into one of our favourite cities. Who better to talk to about this and also about what's in her new magazine? Sophie Grove, editor of Konfekt, former Paris resident. You're kind of useful for today's programme because you can talk from most international bases. Welcome. You sort of arrived last night, fresh to have a look at the new cafe here in Rue Bachaumont. It feels as if things have bedded in really quickly, and there's a lovely excitement around the place this morning as we sort of our events have really taken off today, haven't they?
I know, it was actually wonderful to watch people just taking in the space, the atmosphere, the chaleur, people kept on saying, which is so true. It's very warm. It feels like a home from home, but there is a kind of wonderful Parisian essence in the interiors, and we have lots of beautiful sort of made in France products in the shop which people were poring over. So it's just been such a pleasure for me, having lived here a few years ago, and there was no Monocle bureau, and now I feel like there's a kind of real anchor in the city. We have such a presence. There's been such an investment in people, in space, and I feel so sort of excited by it, and I actually feel more at home in Paris than I ever have.
It's lovely to see. It's I must confess, it's quite strange to have a permanent Monocle base here, but at the same time, it's sort of slotted in rather well. Let's talk about what's in your the latest edition of Konfekt. A beautiful, fresh and bright, clean-looking cover. Really, just opening up after when you've had the news racks full of dark and wintry and hunkering down colours, to have something like that pops off a shelf. So we're going to dive between the pages in a moment. But first, very briefly, just talk us through your cover, Sophie.
So it's very crisp, cottons and this bright spring light. This is shot actually in Villa-Noyal, which is in Hyères, just right on the French Riviera. It's a 1920s building built by Robert Mallet Stevens, who is an amazing architect, for these patrons of the arts, the Noel family. And it was where, all of the kind of early modernists kind of cavorted. Lots of amazing films were set there. Some Man Ray filmed there. And so all of these incredible artists were there. And I think we really just wanted to kind of conjure that essence. And we followed the light a little bit because this was shot a few weeks ago. And capture also the idea of it being a design issue. So the thread that runs through the spring issue is not just the season, and it really is an ode to the season, but also interiors, architecture, design, craft, and we really want to kind of filter that through every story. So for instance, there's a big round table which is in the sort of food and entertaining section, which is actually about acoustics, sound, noise, and really the concept of how we relate to the senses in architecture as much as we do to what we actually just see, and how maybe some architects have slightly forgotten the sense of hearing and sound.
And that is obviously something that chimes very close to my heart, because if you are listening to this now, I wonder if you have us on in the background in your kitchen, in your living room, or whether we're plugged into your ears as you go for a run. That sense of intimacy is what is so important for something like radio, and actually for hospitality as well. I mean, how many times have we stood or sat or been placed in a place where you either can't hear your neighbour because of the extraneous noise, or because no one has suggested that actually noise can travel up, noise can travel outwards, and it's incredibly important that coziness is as much a part of what you hear and feel as to what you see and touch.
Well, you've completely articulated the essence of this story, but we have a poet, an architect, a designer, and also this amazing acoustic architect and designer called Marie Aina, who we actually asked if we could host it in her amazing home, which is in Munich. She makes these installations that actually absorb the sound, so they take that clatter out, and they're also just incredibly beautiful, expressive pieces of art that you have in your house. But some of these participants were talking about that. Why is it that we have sort of overlooked this absolute urgent need to be able to hear each other? And it's jarring with us. And a couple of them were artists who have installations at the Venice Biennale, which is coming up in May. Marie has something at Salone de Mobile, which is coming up in April. So it's a little bit of a preview to their projects, but also reflecting on soundscapes, all these buzzing, humming things we're building in even in nature, and animals can hear, we can't. So we really deep dive there.
It's a wonderful article. Finally, one other thing that has piqued your interest, or you want us all to rush out and rip open the pages, tear open. What we really want to do is find an article that we want to tear out and stick on our walls, our fridges, inside our bags, wherever.
I mean, there's so much in here. I mean, this is one of my, I just opened it on the page, but one of my favourite pieces is from Maremma. It's about cowgirls and these incredible, this culture of sort of riding and herding, these incredibly brave women that Laura Reisman, our correspondent in Italy, has sought out, and the photographs are incredibly expansive and beautiful.
Wonderful. Sophie Grove, thank you so much for joining me in the studio on a busy day for Monocle. You're listening to Monocle Radio live from Rue Bachemont in Paris. Let's hear now the latest headlines from the world of interior design. I am more than delighted to welcome Jean Desportes, Editor-in-Chief of Sloft, into our studio at Rue Bachemont. Bonjour, good morning, Jean. Good afternoon, I should say, wherever you're listening.
No, good morning.
Hello, Jean. How are you?
Fine. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to our new studio. A man who obviously is incredibly on the pulse when it comes to interior design, compact interiors, which is something that the French in particular are particularly good at here in Paris. Welcome to our not so compact cafe and shop and studio. It's huge, isn't it?
Not so compact. I was really impressed because I thought that in fact there would be just one room behind the street, and in fact no, it's very profound, very very long, and I'm really impressed.
Is that particular of this part of town? We're in the second arrondissement in Paris, which is traditionally the kind of the exchange area, a bit of a financial area, but obviously changing with the times.
Yeah.
But someone was telling me yesterday that this part of town, actually, they have some quite deep buildings because you have courtyards, but you also have, these must be former factories and a former industrial part of town, mustn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Because in the 19th century, all this place is connected to the former Halles district, which was the biggest market in the center of Paris. And so all around this place, there were a lot of, like manufacturing atelier and buildings. And so you've got the first building on the street, and then you've got a kind of succession of different buildings, and connected by a kind of yard. And so you go from the first building to the second one, to the third one, and to the fourth one. And so you can't even figure out that, when you pass along a building, there are so many more just behind the door.
And this gives an incredible view of how Paris functions, that in any other city, there would be developers salivating at the prospect of knocking spaces like this down and turning it into, sort of, what do they say, maximising the space, making sure that they can get as many places and businesses and apartments into per square metre. This is something that the centre of Paris, at least, really resists, isn't it?
I think so, because in fact, all these, former ateliers are still alive, because they're really appreciated by artists or craftsmen, people who find them still relevant. And so there is still, this organic life in those places.
So let's look at your wonderful, wonderful magazine, Sloft, dedicated to compact interiors, something obviously that Parisians doing very, very well. You've got us a hot list of the latest trends for 2025. I'm not entirely sure whether trends is the most accurate way of describing the sort of styles that are going on in interior design. What I find amazing, and I'm going to give away your four: woody, industrial, minimalist, and neo-rococo. A bit of me is thinking, what's left? What are we not doing this year?
I'm sure that there are plenty of things we're not doing this year, but it is true that there are kind of massive trends that you see in all the bunches of projects we receive at Sloft. And so we can categorize them in those four categories. And there are many others, but those are kind of, very, very present at the moment.
So where do we want to begin? Should we start about industrial? Because we're talking about this area of town. And I was in a Parisian apartment yesterday, which was clearly a converted factory. And the sense of space was enormous, but they had kept the industrial atmosphere to it. It felt super Parisian, but super not at the same time. They were sort of trying to do a sort of a New York loft, but they were keeping it chic. So what is it about the industrial style at the moment which is so attractive?
So this industrial style is, I think, a bit different than the one that was in the loft of New York in the 90s, because it's an industrial trend which is, I think, made of very industrial materials like stainless steel, like tiles, like rough concrete, and it is minimalistic, but also it is as if it was made for, creating cocoon that would protect yourself, that are quite strong and to face, any threat of the times, So it is like minimalistic, but also with very strong and industrial materials. It can look like sometimes to like an hospital a bit, or like if it was like a post-pandemic style, in order to create dwellings ready to resist or to fight, so it is linked to, I think, a kind of violence of our times at the moment.
Another trend that we're looking at, which has that same desire to protect and to cocoon, is wood. That has a different protective feeling to it. It has a warmth to it. If you step inside the Monocle Café, you will notice that we're big on wood. Is that being mirrored? Is that trend being mirrored across Paris as well?
Exactly, yeah. It's a very, very strong trend at the moment. So it is all about, warmth, feeling very protected by your own surrounding. And so this trend is based on, I would say, like intense, profound, deep shades and materials. So you will have a lot of walnut wood. You will have a lot of velvet curtains with very profound tints like a deep green or an orange or a brown. You've got also a lot of, tainted oak. And then it is linked to very, I would say, tamed lights, create a very enveloping atmosphere. And this is massive. And when I popped in the Monocle store, I thought to myself, okay, they're in this trend because, and it is really well done, and you feel very comfortable in the Monocle Cafe.
It is very cozy. It is kind of our vernacular to have warm and welcoming.
And I think it is linked to the need of people to feel really safe and in a very warm and productive interior. And it is still, I think, a kind of reaction to our times.
Thank you so much. Jean Desportes, Editor-in-Chief of Sloft, a fabulous magazine. You're listening to Monocle Radio. Let's continue with the interior design theme now on The Briefing, coming to you from Rue Bachaumont in Paris. We heard a moment ago about the trend, the fashion, the love for wood and its comforting and welcoming aspects. You couldn't really ask for more when it comes to the latest iteration of Monocle popping up in Paris in a permanent way. And very much the feeling here is that wood rules the day. Now, this is down to one very marvellous company called Can Design. Hussam Kanan and Megadi Simonian join me in their studio. A very good afternoon to you both. Welcome. You are responsible for the way that Monocle looks in Paris.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
It's
buzzing out there today. We have the big event of us all opening, and so this is that moment when I'm imagining all these things that have been in your head and written down and planned and then built. Suddenly, it's full of people. How do you feel?
Yeah, actually, we are very happy with the result. It was very challenging to adapt the concept of Monocle to this typology, which is very Parisian typology of shop, starting with a big rectangle area, which follows with a narrow space, which is the back store. So, we try to create a very strong link between the cafe to the shop, to the retail space, with the repetition of a few furnitures of our collections, actually.
And one of the interesting things was that you were sent to Zurich, weren't you, to have a look at our setup there. And then the brief was, do that, make it French in this space and sort of elevate the next generation of Monocle design. I mean, I can imagine when that email arrived, that was like quite, where do you begin with this? It's a big but glorious challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. We should have begin to visit the space. We live in Paris since more than 20 years, so we know and we work in Paris since 20 years, so we know the typology of spaces that there is. So when we have the idea of the way it's segmented. So when we came to the space, we noticed it's a classic French Parisian boutique. So we decided to put the monocle theme, the monocle word in this Parisian space. That's what we liked in this project too.
The codes are very clear, aren't they, for Monocle?
Yeah, because we visited. We had time before we really draw the project. We had time with Tyler, where we talked a lot about what he wants for the space. We met a lot of people from Monocle, from the team. So we exchanged a lot on the technical things and aesthetic part of the project.
Tell us a little bit more about Can Design. Was it founded by your father?
Can Design was founded by me and Meredi. But the base, it's my father. My father is a carpenter, a cabinet maker in Lebanon, in a small village in the north of Beirut called Beit Shabab, a really beautiful village with old Lebanese buildings. I love my village. So, the thing is, in 1958, my father, who was a cabinet maker, created his atelier, his small. It's not a factory, it's really a workshop. And he began to work to do projects only in the region, in Lebanon and Beirut especially. And in 2010, I was like, when I was small, my father was obliging me to work in the summer with him in the workshop. I was hating that because I wanted to play basketball and football like every kid. But with time, when I got older, the link was still here without noticing it. So in 2010, when I had the idea to begin a maison d'édition, like an editor of furniture, what is Can Design, the first thing I did, I went to see my father, told him I have these designs, I work with designers, can we prototype it and work on a project?
What did he say?
He said, I don't think it will work, but I will follow you in everything. My father is really a really
Great
kind
supporter.
guy, great supporting father, and my mother too. They're both of them. They said, okay, we don't know it's gonna work, but let's go for it. And we begin the project, and it get the first year. It was really a great year. So after 1 year, he said, okay, it's serious. Let's go further. And so here we are.
And in 2010, you get together, and the idea is, obviously, we've just had Hussam talking about the familial collection to Lebanon, but you're based in Paris. So there's this blending that has to take place, isn't there? Tell us about that, Megidi.
Yes, actually, we work, like as Hussam was saying, it's a maison d'édition. So we work with talented designers coming from everywhere, actually. The design studio is based in Paris, actually, and all the prototypes and the production, it's based in Lebanon. Actually, we got this heritage which comes from the father of Hussam. We got cabinet makers and steel workers and woodworkers that they are working with his dad like since maybe 30 or 40 years. So
as far as I can remember, am I right in thinking that where we are sitting now and the furniture that we're sitting on and the walls that we're walking past were placed on a ship and brought over from Lebanon and
Exactly.
assembled here in Paris?
Yes.
Exactly.
That is, dare I say it, very ambitious and probably quite hard work, but quite rewarding, I would imagine, to see when you sort of see it take form.
yeah.
Manual work it's hard work. We know that. I come from a family of carpenters and cabinet makers. It's a hard work. That's why my father didn't want his children to have this. He wanted us to go to Paris and to do to study and to have more. He said intellectual work, but in a way we came back to this work. Me and my brother, who is
The chief of operation in the atelier, actually.
in the factory in Lebanon. So. It's a hard work, but after, of course, the first project that we did in 2010 was what are we doing? It's really hard to do that. But when you have a professional team and you have a really effective and factory that works good with a lot of great people working in it, things get easier. And with experience, of course, everything gets slower and you see things, details in a more intelligent way. So.
Finally, what's quite lovely when we saw you coming in is that you come into a room and you check the table and you just check the space, and it's lovely to see you sort of doing a little bit of surveillance. What surprised you? What's delighted you the most about this space that you didn't realise when you're designing it, but then you sort of have to bring it alive with people? Is there anything that you've walked in and thought, oh, I didn't realise that it was going to be like that, and it's charmed you, Megidi?
Yeah, actually, the big surprise, it was after that we delivered the furniture, because of course we bring noble materials like the oak wood, the brown marble, the bronze mirror, the details with leathers, to have a very charming, welcoming place, kind of chic and elegant. But after the styling, actually, the environment that the Monocle lifestyle creates, actually, it's very inspiring. It was something that we could have imagined because we have checked the Zurich shop, but it was very exciting to see it coming to Paris, actually.
How about you, Hussam? What was the thing that you went, oh, the good oh?
It's something in our work that we like. Every time when we come after our project, our work in a project is finished, we see how people invest the space. We when we came the first time after we saw the artwork, the life, because of course we do a space with a lot of thinking about the details and everything, but the life styling should come from the client after all. So when we came and we see the artwork and the way it gets cozier, we felt a lot of things that we couldn't bring, like a little bit of English from London things with the artworks, with the
candles, the flowers, the book selection, with the goods. It was
great.
Yeah,
and
nice.
Today it's a great thing because we came in, we saw people laughing, having a good time, and taking a coffee and sitting on our furniture that we check, of course, every 2 seconds. But we like that it's living good, and it's the artwork. To answer your question, it's really the artworks that I felt it changed a lot the project, and it put it on a good rail.
And that was Hussam Kanan and Megdi Simonian from Can Design. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio in one of your own designs. This is The Briefing, and that's all the time we have for today's edition live from Paris. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producer Anita Riotta. Our researcher was Francesca Jilks and our studio manager was Flynn Simons. I'll be back later with a live edition of the Monocle Daily, live from 16 Rue Bachamont. Hope you can join us for that if you can. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you for listening.